So this topic has been kind of lurking in the background of our last few videos, and the lack of definitive answers has been slightly annoying me. Here's the deal. When our PC contributor Requiem started his Pragmata PlayStation 5 analysis as an assist for figuring out optimized settings on PC, he found that the game was without doubt running at 1440p internal resolution. I say without doubt because Pragmata also uses FSR1 spatial upscaling, which means that counting out the pixels is much easier than a typical game released in the modern era. Okay, 1440p, base PlayStation 5, doesn't sound like anything amiss, right? Except that Tom, working on the main content, found that his version of Pragmata, the same code as that run by Requiem, was running at 1080p on both resolution and frame rate modes. Oliver took a look at the game and found the same 1080p. I then gave it a shot myself and found a native 1440p. So, a bit of a mystery to solve then, but before we move on, a Pragmata related message from the sponsor of this video. Would you like a free Pragmata PC code? If so, MSI has a promotion you should take a look at. Simply purchase an eligible MSI gaming monitor or desktop PC, submit a review on an eligible platform, register your product with MSI and send in your details to receive your code. This offer is valid until the end of May or while stocks last. Check out the video description below for full terms and conditions and to learn more. So somehow 4 different Digital Foundry members using 4 entirely separate PlayStation 5 consoles were coming up with 2 different pixel counts. No dynamic resolution in play or anything like that. It's a genuine puzzle. Truth is, everyone doing their tests was 100% accurate, which means that there's a way to run a 1080p PlayStation 5 game at 1440p. I looked into it further and now have definitive methodology for kicking in higher resolution on the base PlayStation 5, working on versions of the game up to patch 1.21 anyway. The process is super easy, but also somewhat exclusionary because the technique for getting it working requires 2 things you might not have access to. Firstly, you're going to need cloud saves, which annoyingly means you'll need a PlayStation Plus subscription. Secondly, well, you're going to need access to a PlayStation 5 Pro console to generate the required save game to make 1440p possible. So beyond that, moving from 1080p to 1440p resolution means that the pixel throughput of the frame increases by around 78%, which means the GPU is under more load, meaning you'll get decreased frame rates naturally. In this video, we'll also be benchmarking the 1440p mode to see how it stacks up against the stock game in both the resolution and frame rate modes. Let's get the basic method out of the way first. You start on PlayStation 5 Pro and boot up the game. That's pretty much all you need to do. Now simply return to the PS5 front end, go to the system settings and upload your data to the cloud. This save acts as a key for unlocking 1440p resolution on a base PS5. So yeah, you're either going to need a Pro yourself, or you'll need to visit a friend with hardware, add your account and follow the instructions before logging out and heading back to your base console. Now, on the standard PlayStation 5, all you need to do is visit the system menus and now download the cloud save onto your PS5. From here on out, you're good to go. You can then choose the resolution or frame rate mode as usual and game away as normal. If you want to swap modes, just return to the menu, change the mode as usual and return to the game. The resolution quote-unquote upgrade should still be there. The best way to get back to 1080p stock mode is to delete the save. Now obviously, we're dealing with adjusting save games here, so it may well be best if you stick to stock 1080p for your actual playthrough, especially as I suspect the fun and games with what must surely be a bug will almost certainly be patched by Capcom at some point, probably after this video. So what's the deal about a 1440p resolution increase anyway? Well, a base 1080p rendering resolution for PlayStation can be absolutely fine. Many games run at this pixel count or lower, but generally there tends to be a temporal reconstruction upscaler in effect, drawing on history to improve the quality of the frame. By using FSR1, a very basic spatial upscaler, you get an image which looks very much like 1080p in nature. By moving to 1440p, the pixel crawl and other aliasing issues are diminished. Image quality is substantially improved, but of course we're asking the same GPU to render 77% more pixels while trying to achieve the same 60 FPS target. And in the case of the resolution mode, we're also asking it to render higher precision ray tracing and higher quality hair strands. Something's got to give. Frame rate mode stands more of a chance in holding its performance level as it's using the downgraded hair quality and no ray tracing, so let's check that one out first of all. It's rare to find performance drops in frame rate mode in the stock 1080p configuration, but if you are going to find bottlenecks, it's likely to be with close-ups on Diana's flowing hair. This cutscene very early on shows a small drop beneath the target, 57 FPS at stock 1080p, 42 FPS with our injected 1440p save. That's a 17.5 millisecond frame time up against 23.8 milliseconds, so almost 5 milliseconds longer to draw the same scene at the higher resolution. Pragmata budgets 16.7 milliseconds per frame, so you can see why 1440p perhaps isn't viable. But this doesn't happen all of the time, of course. Pragmata in frame rate mode does tend to hit 60 FPS at 1080p most of the time, meaning there's a lot of overhead still in there. The same can't be said for 1440p, however, as you can see here in another piece of cutscene content. So far, we've just looked at cutscenes for matched content, but if we swap to gameplay, the simpler action can still hold to 60 frames per second, albeit with some instability, but the more challenging levels take us into the 50s. If Pragmata used dynamic resolution scaling in a 1080p to 1440p window, chances are you could get a higher overall quality presentation, but perhaps it would be less impressive without a reconstruction-based upscaler in the picture. There's a wide range of content in the game with varying demands on the GPU, so Capcom essentially adopts a base rendering resolution that'll keep you at 60 FPS for the vast majority of play. I'd say there's potential for a 1440p frame rate mode as an option. Better still if VRR is in the picture. Properly implemented VRR, by the way. Not the system level feature, as I found that frame rates could dip beneath the 48 FPS threshold, leading to some judder. Now, it shouldn't be extraordinarily difficult for Capcom to implement proper VRR at 120Hz, as that feature is already integrated in the PS5 Pro version of the game. Resolution mode is more interesting, however, because it's not actually a resolution mode. The stock game runs at the same 1080p as frame rate mode, but you're getting additional features, ray-traced reflections, ray-traced global illumination, and a higher quality iteration of Capcom's fantastic hair strand technology. In stock 1080p configuration, you aren't getting a locked 60 frames per second, but the upgrades provided are highly worthwhile. So what happens when we ramp up pixel count to 1440p with the Pro Save game? Let's take another look at matched cutscene content. Here you'll find that a lot of the experience does run at 60 frames per second, but at 1440p we rarely hit the target, instead lurking at lower performance levels throughout. Still not bad though, right? Well, hair strands and RT combined add extra load, but also highly variable load. In opting for 1080p, Capcom is aiming at making lower performance the exception rather than the rule, but you can still find drops, especially in cutscenes. Here, we're at 47 FPS at stock 1080p, 35 FPS at 1440p, a 34% performance advantage for the lower resolution, which kind of checks out, right? When you're hitting frame rate dips like this at 1440p, the argument perhaps shifts towards a higher resolution 30 FPS capped quality mode, or maybe a 40 FPS mode with drops. Most of the content, including gameplay, is typically above the 40 FPS threshold, but yeah, when the engine is very taxed, especially in hair-dominated cinematics, you're trending more towards 30 FPS as a more viable, more consistent cap limit. My feeling here, I still think base PS5 with 120Hz and VRR support could make for a meaningful option here, either uncapped or with optional 30 FPS or 40 FPS limits. While Capcom generally tends to favour high performance and mode simplicity historically, well, we do have some precedent for a wider range of modes, as we saw in Monster Hunter Wilds, running on the same engine. A final comparison based on the data we have from the 1440p mode is to stack up the tweaked resolution and frame rate modes head to head. Remember, same native rendering resolution here, just with ray-traced reflections, GI and higher quality hair rendering on the left side there. We can't rule out other tweaks to settings, of course. We'll look at that in our upcoming PC optimized settings report, but the frame rate differentials are intriguing. In the case of the Diana introduction cutscene, those added effects are costing anything between an 8 to an 11 FPS hit to performance based on content. But the nature of the added visual features will of course vary according to the content. It's a 14 FPS differential here. Okay then, so interesting stuff, but there's one final test to check out. One of our supporters on Discord reported that they got path tracing working on the AMD RX 9070 XT on the PC version of Resident Evil Requiem via a Steam Cloud Save sync. Yeah, basically, the AMD card shouldn't be able to run path tracing. It's locked out by software. But, it is the same theory that we're using here with Pragmata on PlayStation 5. Open up a feature using supported hardware, then use the save game to run that feature on unsupported hardware, which raises the obvious question. If we can increase the resolution on the PS5 version of Pragmata, what about Resident Evil Requiem? There's commonality in engines here, likely a lot of shared underlying code, so maybe the same trick could work? Of course, I had to try it, even though I didn't own the game personally, so I needed to buy it to try it. And well, let's just say that it's not money well spent in this case, as the game is essentially the same with or without the Pro's save on a base unit, which to be fair is the way things are meant to be, right? Still, there's been a lot of discussion recently about console games and the extent to which the user should have customization options. Should Pragmata have an enhanced settings menu that does have access to a higher 1440p resolution mode? Maybe with recommendations from Capcom on which modes they suggest to be best. Maybe I'm too invested in this 1440p stuff by now, having figured out how to activate it, but there is one last comparison that I think is quite intriguing. At stock 1080p, Capcom is offering you two mode choices. Essentially, enhanced visuals or smoother performance, basically. But the existence of the 1440p option via the PS5 Pro save allows us to conduct an academic but curious comparison. Rather than choose between smoother performance or extra visual features, how about choosing between extra visual features and higher resolution? So basically, with the data we have, stock 1080p resolution mode on the left there, versus 1440p frame rate mode on the right there. And here's how that looks. The 1080p resolution mode is faster, but not exactly game-changingly faster, just a few FPS in these tests. Something to think about. But I think I've gone through enough permutations at this point, so I'm going to leave it at that for now. The PS5 Pro save game situation may well be patched by the time you see this, as our prior content has certainly given the developers time enough to isolate why it's happening. But even if that's the case, the data here is still quite compelling, right? Anyway, like, subscribe, share if you enjoyed the content, ring bells for instant notifications, and please do consider the DF Supporter Program. High quality video downloads, early access to DF Direct, the chance to help shape the show, news updates from the team, an amazing Discord community, and much, much more. But for now, thanks for watching and supporting Digital Foundry.